told my wife, I said, I think, Santee has just left the building.
Two judges have told me it's illegal what they're doing.
We have had a history of problems with Baltimore County.
There is collusion in Baltimore County regarding police activity, regarding zoning activity, and regarding court processes.
Mr. C.A.N. Executive, I'm from Dundalk TV. I'd like to know if you'd like to say anything about the North Point Government Center.
How you doing? Good to see you.
I'm doing well.
And Dundalk TV would like to just keep on following what's going on. The more that I learn about what is going on throughout Baltimore County, the more disgusted I become, and the more unbelievable it all is.
Let me talk for a second, okay? No, it's my job to talk, your job to listen right now. Then I'll listen to you.
Wow, how far have we come?
Kamenetz squanders millions. He is squandering all kinds of your tax dollars. It needs to stop. We can come together. We can all make a difference coming together.
You know, we can make a difference, but we have to hold ourselves and our leaders to a higher standard. Too many times we're willing to let the politicians slide without really asking them probing questions while election time is on, without really gaining a good understanding of who that potential elected official is and what he or she thinks. And that's very important because we need leaders that will listen, not leaders that'll pay lip service to listening and then go ahead and make a decision they were going to make anyway, but somebody that considers our input, that takes it in consideration, explains to us either why our input is a good idea or a bad idea, and then go ahead and acts upon that input. I was very encouraged. I saw something that I'm a person of 65 years, lifelong Baltimore County resident. I would have never thought that I'd see the Dundalk area elect a Republican county councilman and Republican elected delegates at the state level. So that was very good. But I'm not here to make a partisan pitch. That's beside the point. The point is that you saw your past elected officials weren't listening to you, and you said, let's boot them out and try somebody else, and hopefully they will listen to us. So, in coming elections, make sure that you really grill these candidates. Make sure you know what's in their heart, because if you don't, you'll get bamboozled. Up in our area, Timonium, we had a situation 4 years ago where we elected somebody and we got bamboozled. That councilman wanted to be one of the boys, wanted to do everything that would get him in the good graces of the administration. And that proved disastrous for us. And I'll talk about one of those disasters in a minute. But first I want to talk about Mays Chapel, as was indicated. And it just doesn't have to be elected officials. We found the case of Mays Chapel Elementary School that the school board and our superintendent didn't want to listen to us any either. So let me give you a couple of minutes worth of background on this Mays Chapel Elementary School. Residents all up and down the York Road corridor knew that we needed another elementary school, or at least more classrooms in the York Road corridor. Nobody was disagreeing with that. But when the school board came out, they gave us two alternatives. They said you can either build a new school in Mays Chapel, which was at the extreme western edge of the York Road corridor, or you can build one at another site that's called Delaney Springs, which again was at the extreme eastern edge of the York Road corridor. Now, when we heard about this, many of us got concerned. So we started going to school board meetings. Okay, have any of you ever been to school board meetings? They have a very strange way of gaining public input. You know, unlike a county council session, at the end of the county council sessions, you can speak for 3 minutes about anything, about men on Mars, or about, you know, the color of paint, or about some county problem. But the school board makes it a lot tougher. They restrict it to 10 people. And you have to put your name in a box and they pick at random, or at least we hope they pick at random, the 10 people that they want to speak. And then you're given your chance to make a speech. Now, it doesn't make any difference if there's 30 citizens there to speak. You'll only get 10 speakers. And that's not right. And further, unlike the end of county council sessions, where sometimes you'll get the council person to engage you and ask you a couple questions about the topic you're speaking about, in my experiences, I don't think I've ever seen, well, maybe once or twice, but very, very, very seldom, a school board member ask the speaker some questions about the topic. So when they announced that there were going to be these two alternatives, either Mays Chapel or Delaney Springs, several of us went to the school board sessions. And a couple of us were lucky in one meeting, and then one of us in another meeting to be one of those 10 chosen speakers. So we put them on notice that we didn't think that these were good alternatives for the site. Well, about 2 months after that, the school board took a preliminary vote. And lo and behold, Mays Chapel was their selection. We were appalled, quite frankly, that they did that, because they really hadn't reached out to the community and tried to have a dialogue about why we had concerns. And they said after this preliminary vote that they were going to take the official vote, but a little detail got in their way. State law said that they had to have an official public hearing before they could make their decision. And fortunately, in the public hearing, anyone could get a chance to speak. So, when that public hearing came, you had not 2 or 3 people speaking out against Mays Chapel, but you had literally a couple dozen, actually more than a couple dozen speaking out. Now, the reasons why we oppose Mays Chapel, I'll condense it down to 3 real brief remarks. Number one, we knew that in building a 700-seat elementary school, they would need more than the 10 acres that the Board of Education owned. Okay. Adjacent to that 10 acres was another 10 acres of county parkland, and we knew that was going to be a casualty of the need for this new school. Residents use that 10 acres every day, as well as the Board of Education site, because a walking trail had been set up. The Department of Recreation and Parks had spent over $2 million to level and grade the site. And so we're saying to ourselves, well, we're going to lose our parkland. The county is going to have wasted $2 million. That doesn't seem like it's a very good planning, process. Secondly, we knew that Mays Chapel really wasn't a specific area that needed an elementary school. Mays Chapel was an early planned unit development. You hear all these controversies about PUDs now, but in the early days of this process, PUDs were relegated to a few very large and impactful projects. You had White Marsh over on this side of the county, you had Owings Mills over on that side the other side of the county, and Mays Chapel was the third in that line of big PUDs. Well, the developer originally felt that Mays Chapel was going to be predominantly townhouses that would bring families with school-age population, hence the need for a school in that area made some sense. But again, that's not what it turned out to be, because the real estate market wasn't there for families demanding townhouses in Mays Chapel. What you had were empty nesters that were moving out of their single-family homes into condos. You had singles who didn't want a single-family home and would rather have a condo. And then you had some married couples, but with no children. I actually took a review of the census information. And within a half-mile radius of that Mays Chapel school site, the census showed there was a total of 20 children ages 18 and under. So where was the demand for that particular area to have a school? It wasn't there. Plus, the closest, nearest elementary school was not over capacity. It was just slightly by about 5 children under capacity. So again, that area didn't need another elementary school. On the other hand, on the east side of York Road, almost all the elementary schools were over capacity. So the argument seemed to be to me, well, if you're going to need to do that, pick the other side, Delaney Springs. Now finally, and this was probably the most egregious thing that we saw, was that school officials and I'm talking about the paid professional full-time school officials, as well as school board members, repeated a lie that said that the other side, Delaney Springs, had no public utilities. Mays Chapel did have public utilities, therefore it would be cheaper to build at Mays Chapel than to extend public utilities. I drove over there, and within 25 feet of the entrance into this other site, there's a bright orange fire hydrant. Water was there. I went down to the corner of the property, looked in the road that ran along the one side of the property. I saw sewer manholes in the road. Electric utility lines were overhead, so clearly all utilities were there. But when the final vote was taken, a school board member had the nerve to say, even after we had made the school system aware that what they were saying wasn't true, had the nerve to go on the record and say, well, Mays Chapel makes sense because it has utilities and the other site does not. Again, we were appalled. Now, let me conclude some remarks. So, the school system was required to have a public meeting, public hearing, as I said, before they took their final and official vote. Many of us turned down. Some of us, it was just the impassioned, we don't want to lose our part sort of speeches. Others of us got down to the nitty-gritty and gave detailed reasons why we thought this school site was inappropriate. We even went to the extent and created a binder showing 5 other options where they could take and do a building addition on an existing school site. And we had site plans and cost estimates and all that information that we presented to the board. Okay. At the end of the night, the board dropped a real stunner on us. They said, we're going to take our official vote the very next day. Now, can you imagine that? They just sat through 3 hours of public testimony about this thing, and they're going to make a decision the next day? Are they listening to us? It's obvious they weren't. They were going through the motions because the state told them they had to. So they had the vote the next day, and of course Mays Chapel won. But after that meeting, we wrote the State Board of Education, and we questioned the fact that, again, the school board wasn't complying with the law because they didn't adequately put public notices in the newspapers about the public hearing for the time that the state law requires before you actually have the public hearing. To our amazement, the State Board of Education said, you know what, community, you're right. School board, you have to go through and adequately advertise it and then have your public hearing. So we repeated that, I'd call it a charade, over again, and the vote came out. And they voted for Mays Chapel. We then took the decision to circuit court. We ended up losing there largely because the school was in a rush to get this thing started. And I'll argue with you, it wasn't because of only the pressing needs, but because they knew if we challenged them in court, once it got started, the judge would say, well, I'm not going to overturn all this just based on your arguments, you know. And that's exactly what happened. The judge said the school has started, the things you're raising are a moot point because the school is being built. And so, but we haven't lost yet. One final thing to say about the county and some of the ways that the Timonium area has been treated. Some of you may have seen an article about 10 days ago or so in the Baltimore Sun about a car dealership up on York Road above Warren Road. Okay. Perfect example. That former councilman who's no longer there representing the 3rd District, he introduced a change to the zoning laws that paved the way for that car dealership to be located where it's proposed now. And the funny thing about it, there's only one other piece of property in the entire county that the county planning office has been able to say has similar zoning partitions the way that property does. And that other property is a railroad right-of-way, which is 50-foot wide and really doesn't have direct public access and therefore wouldn't be applicable. So that change in the zoning law was done by that councilman for the benefit of this particular situation. Now, as we move forward, let me ask the group to keep their eye on one change that may be coming to the way the county conducts its business this fall. Okay. A bill will be introduced by the current councilman in the 3rd District that says that the time period between when a change in law is introduced and when it's voted upon will be changed from the current 40 days to, and he's wrestling whether to make it 75 or 90 days. Now that's important. Why? Because the current situation, if you're not on the county, and I mean literally every day, you go away for a week on vacation or something, and you find out about changes in the law that are maybe 30 days away, okay? It's very seldom that you can get the community mobilized within 30 days to come out and fight a law. With 75 or 90-day period between introduction and when a vote will take place, it will be much easier to change a law. Now, if the council approves that change, it's also going to have to be voted on by the voters in the next election because the county charter actually prescribes this 40-day time period. And to change the charter, you have to do it by amendment. But if that comes to be, I want to encourage everybody to support that because it will make a big difference in getting communities mobilized to fight unfair laws.